So we involved service users who were aged 18 years and above, who accessed care at 21 SARCs across England between September 2019 and September 2021. And for the most part, ISVAs passed on information about the study to their clients who gave permission for the researchers to contact them. And service users participated in a baseline interview upon entry into the study, and there were 2 follow-ups, one at 6 months and one at a year. So we'll just take this opportunity to share about how the participants were at the point where they joined the study. And just some brief context, you can see here that on average, there was 100 days between a participant entering the SARC and entering our study. And we'll also identify any changes in mental health over that 1 year period. So, as you can see here, so overall, around 40%, so 43% of participants accessed a SARC within 7 days of an incident taking place. But it is very important to note that our study was in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. So at the outset of the study, this figure is sitting more around 60%. So there was an impact from the pandemic there. And you can see here that 31% of people entered the SARC over a year after the incident. So the shift for help from recent to non-recent abuse, including childhood sexual abuse, could potentially have been triggered by the pandemic, but we do need to look more into that data. So here we're looking at the perpetrator of the abuse. So you can see here that 13% of our samples sought help which was related to childhood sexual abuse, be it by a family member or another perpetrator. And nearly 20%, so 18%, came forward to receive help for an assault by a stranger, and the largest percentage, 38%, for assault from an acquaintance, and 25% came forward with help having been victimised within a relationship by a current or a former partner. So who actually joined the cohort? So 337 in the cohort, so 302 identify as female, 28 as male, and 5 people identifying as non-binary. So with an average age of 32, but you can see the age range spanned from 18 to 75, so it was a really wide age range in our cohort. 4 out of 5 identified as heterosexual, with 1 in 5 participants identifying as part of the LGBTIQ+ community. 15% were culturally or ethnically diverse, i.e. not white British. And 45% identified as having a disability that limited their day-to-day function, and 40% had a pre-existing mental health condition. And nearly half of the cohort had children at home. 1 in 5 participants were unable to work due to poor health. 1 in 6 participants struggled daily to make ends meet. 15% were in social housing, and 1/3 were educated to degree level or above. And about 50% were in employment, and 15% were students. So looking at adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences refer to a broad set of negative childhood experiences that include abuse, neglect, serious household dysfunctions, so it could be exposure to domestic violence or somebody in the home having a drug problem, and you can see those listed on the side here. So this graph shows you, so on the side you've got the number of participants up here, And over here is the number of ACEs, the number of adverse childhood experiences that each member of our cohort identify as having. So in our study, we measured the exposure to the 13 different ACEs that you can see there. And the original ACEs study was conducted by Vincent Felitti and his colleagues in the US in the 1990s, and they found that people who had experienced 4 or more ACEs compared to those who hadn't experienced any at all, had a much greater likelihood of developing a whole range of mental and physical health problems over the course of their lifetime, and that includes depression, obesity, sexual health problems, and heart disease. And just to put this into some more context for you, so studies that measure ACEs in the general population find that around 15% of people of the general population have 4 or more ACEs. So in other words, they've got a high risk for poor health outcomes across their lifespan. And in a recent review, which combined 24 different studies, the average number of ACEs for any person in the general population was 3. And now taking a closer look at our cohort, so nearly 80%, so 78% of our participants had 4 or more ACEs, and the average number of ACEs from our participants was 6, so that's double the number of ACEs from the general population. And I'm now going to hand it to Laura.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about lifetime domestic violence and abuse. And domestic violence and abuse is an area that we are also passionate about understanding, and we want to know more about our experience, the experiences of our sample in relation to domestic abuse. So what we've done is tracked people's experiences of domestic violence over the course of the study, but we've also asked people about their experiences in the lead up to the study. Okay. So here I'm going to present 4 perspectives on domestic violence and abuse. For each, the blue bar represents people saying, yes, that happened to me, and the orange bar is the number of no's that we have on each of the 4 measures of domestic violence and abuse. So the first measure, in fact, links to one of the 15 ACEs that Martin referred to. So it's people's exposure to severe household violence in the household when they were growing up. And from the graph, you can see that half of the participants had witnessed severe forms of domestic abuse in the household. In terms of people's experiences as adults, you can see that 250 of the participants, at 75% of the sample, said that they had experienced domestic violence directly at some point in their life. We looked at the proportion that had experienced physical abuse in their lifetime, and it was 50% of participants. And we were also keen to understand about the experiences of people in the year before they joined the study. So we found that 1/3 of our participants had experienced domestic violence and abuse in the year before they entered the study. And you might remember from an earlier slide that 1/4 of the sample had sought help at the start due to sexual violence by a partner or ex-partner. This shows that actually even more people were experiencing domestic violence in that period as well. Now moving on to looking at the health and well-being of the participants at the point at which they joined the study. So you remember again from what Martin said, it was around 100 days between when they went to the start and when they enrolled in the study. We had quite a bit of variation, but that was the median number of days. And at that point, 75% of our participants screened positive for post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. 4 out of 5 of the participants screened positive for depression. So 80% of people exhibited depression symptoms. 1 in 4 people told us that they had experienced suicidal thoughts in the previous month. 1 in 10 of them had told us that they had self-harmed in the past month. And over 50% of people screen positive for problem drinking on the OLD measure, that's the World Health Organization measure to screen for problem alcohol use. Just a snapshot, we have so many different variables in the study. We look at sexual health and different aspects of mental health, eating disorders, a whole range of things. I just wanted to offer a snapshot of the baseline results today. But I guess what people are really interested to know is how does it change over time? So remember, people were in the study for a year. So let's take a look at changes over time. We use the PCL measure, PCL-5, to ask people about symptoms related to post-traumatic stress. And that scale goes from 0 to 80, so it corresponds with the y-axis up on the left-hand side. Where's my pointer? There we go. So that's the measure. The PCL goes from 0 to 80. And as you can see, we've got this cutoff here. So 33 is the point at which, if a person goes above 33, they are likely to have PTSD. So this is obviously a research assessment, but they probably have PTSD if they go above 33. Okay. So our average score baseline was 44. Okay, so that's where people were scored. It was really very high. And after 6 months, that came down to just 41. So we're still a good deal above the cutoff. And then at the 12-month mark, people were around 35. Okay. So this is actually an important change. So it's not just statistically relevant, but this is indicative of a clinical change in people's post-traumatic stress over the year after they have been to the SARC. And when I say clinically relevant or important, it means that clinicians would identify an improvement in their clients, and survivors themselves might say that they feel better. They might be having fewer flashbacks, less problems with nightmares. They might feel less numb to the world around them. But let's bear in mind that the average for the group at 12 months is still ever so slightly above the cutoff of 33. And so the burden of PTSD continues for many people a year later. And now just have a look at depression. This is the second variable we're going to look at over time. Actually, this is the only other variable I've presented here today. It's not such an impressive picture. So the depression symptoms really claim. We found that. Again, the scores go from 0 to 30 on this particular measure. It's the CESD score. And the cutoff is there with the broken line. I think the cutoff is, it should be on it's moved a bit, it's 10, that's the cutoff. So our participants were well above that on average at baseline. And then these changes, 15 to 15, not clinically relevant at all. So depression continues. Back to you, Martin.
So what the key findings here? So the MESARC cohort study brings together a diverse sample of individuals who are largely representative of SARC users as a whole. Most people who joined our study were living with PTSD, so 75% of them, and 80% had depressive symptoms that significantly impaired their quality of life. A substantial proportion of participants had childhood trauma, including exposure to sexual abuse. Exposure to domestic violence and abuse was pervasive, with direct domestic violence and childhood exposure, and 1/3 had experienced or been exposed to domestic violence in the previous year. The research observed no change in PTSD and depressive symptoms at 6 months. However, there was a small but very important reduction in PTSD after 1 year. And so what are the key messages here? So SARC service users' needs are very broad and often incredibly complex. And SARCs provide a really key opportunity for identifying needs in collaboration with survivors and tailoring referrals to other agencies in the statutory and the voluntary sectors. And given the challenges facing many survivors, our research suggests that structured support, such as ISVAs and holding care by crisis workers and SARCs, is absolutely essential to enable survivors to engage with the police investigation and the criminal justice system. And our research also highlights an urgent need to increase access to therapies given the burden of distress affecting the lives of SARC service users. And I do believe we've got time for one or two questions, if there are any. Yes, we've got some mics coming.
Hi, I'm Ravi Tiara from the University of Warwick. I just wanted to thank Lorna and the team for a really interesting study. I know it's been a long time. I have lots and lots of questions, but I'm just going to limit myself to a couple. I was struck by your comment about 15% of minority ethnic and culturally diverse groups, and you said they weren't quite British. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that. And also looking at the change that you've shown from baseline to 1 year. I was also struck that 45% of your sample had a disability and 40% had pre-existing mental health issues. And I just wondered whether you've been able to do some kind of more detailed analysis and whether those factors are impacting on the change that you're seeing or not seeing in that cohort. And also whether over that year, that cohort has had access to other support than that offered by SARC, and whether that's a factor in the findings. Thank you.
So some excellent questions. I wonder if maybe you misheard, I think it was not British white, so 85% of participants were not white British. Is that what you're referring to? So it was 15% come from diverse cultural backgrounds and 85%, so they are still British people, not all. We haven't presented the nationalities today, but it was 85% were white British. Okay, does that sound okay, Ravi? Yeah, and then in relation to your second question, it's a key question, it's a core question about whether having a burden of mental health problems at the point of going to SARC can disrupt the potential for recovery. Are we going to see some sort of graded difference? So the 40% of pre-existing problems will correlate with the burden of childhood trauma and the burden of domestic violence exposure. Okay, so we're building a picture. Ravi, I don't have the answers for you today, but I can say that that is an essential question for the research. So we're not just looking at the environmental factors, the service-related factors, the types of interventions. We're certainly doing that. We're also looking at what is residing at the individual level, the family level, that can actually influence that journey and how well people can benefit from the different therapies. So I don't know the answer, but I expect we will see an effect there. And on to your third question was about the different encounters, interactions with different services. Well, the rest of the day is going to be all about that. We absolutely have covered all the different services that people have interacted with. So we look at the criminal justice system, we look at the NHS, we look at third sector, voluntary sector, and any more contact with SARC. Have I forgotten any of it? But yeah, so it's all into, it's too early, I don't have that data yet, but it will also feed into those main analyses that we will look at. For example, the more services you have, does that increase your likelihood of actually reducing your symptoms after 12 months? But thank you for your great questions. Okay. I think we have one more. Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you for the excellent talks. Sorry to ask you a question again. I'm just wondering, in the subgroup, in the group where you found a small but significant improvement of PTSD at the end of 1 year, were you able to do any sub-analysis in terms of any predictive factors, whether if it was an earlier intervention, you could get a result, or if there are particular demographics that led to any more improvement, so that can sort of probably direct our future services. If there was an early intervention led to a better outcome, then we could focus on that. So I'm just wondering if you had done any sub-analysis of that.
I mean, it really connects to, thank you for your question, and very much connects with what Professor Piara asked about. And we will have all that data, we haven't looked at those relationships yet. What I'm giving you today is actually hot off the press. We just finished entering the 12 months data, we just processed it over the weekend, got it on the site. It's sort of like a very first step. But we have a statistician, in Coventry and also at Bristol. They're all working to answer exactly these questions. So please, I know we all want the answers now, but if you can just bear with us next year, these papers will come out, and then hopefully we'll be able to share them with you. So thank you very much for those great questions. Well, this might have to be the last one because we've got to move on to the other presentation.
Hi, Alistair Brown from here. Just a quick one. Normally Cochrane is used to help clinicians understand what might be effective, and then it's fed to patients or presented to patients so they can make an informed choice. Are you going to use your Cochrane findings to enable people to be presented with the evidence and make an informed choice and be able to switch as they go through if it's not appropriate?
Yes. Actually, if you have a look at the information you will see an example of how we are communicating our findings from a Cochrane review, which is so technical, it's 300 pages long, but we have reduced that right down to what are the key messages that we have for survivors, and not just commissioners, practitioners and providers, but what would we like to equip survivors with when they are negotiating their options around care and support. So it's there. Have a look and let us know what you think. I realise there will be lots of questions. We can take some more questions maybe come and talk to a member of the team, but we will move on now to the next talk. And thank you, Martin. That was a great job.